Who doesn't like a cute little animated movie? With the roar of a life-size dinosaur that you can touch and feel? Another level. Be it the spooky Halloween decorations or the thrill of a theme park, or even the patient robots that look and act real, there is a whole industry that brings these real-life and larger-than-life objects to life. Animatronics, a field that utilizes mechanical, electrical, and electronic systems, along with artistry to create moving and talking objects. Whether you like to up your Halloween game or like to build your own little robots, Animatronics may be your opportunity to take it to next level and make it a career. This is Career Calling, and I'm your host, Pratibha Pandit. My guest today is Eric Hart, a veteran theater props master and a director of Animatronics program at University of North Carolina School of the Arts. He will share with us all you need to know about the field of animatronics. Eric has been a props master at several professional theaters and Broadway theaters. Eric's work has also been seen in Disney films, theme parks, and retail stores. Other than leading the graduate level program in animatronics, Eric also shares his knowledge of theater and props making through his book series, The Prop Building Guidebook, for theater, film, and TV. The Prop Effects Guidebook, Lights, Motion, Sound, and Magic. Prop Building for Beginners, 20 props for stage and screen. Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So I'll start with a confession that until a few weeks ago, when I started looking for a profile, I had no idea that there was a field called animatronics. I did know that there is a props department, where people create props for theater shows. So for people like me, why don't you, help us understand what is animatronics?
Sure. It's funny. A lot of people don't know what it is, but a lot of people have seen it. It's basically giving life to inanimate objects and creating characters out of things that are not living. We've all seen like Pirates of the Caribbean at Disney World, Hall of Presidents. Probably you've been to a Chuck E. Cheese and you've seen the animatronics there. And definitely in a lot of movies, E.T. is a big one. And of course, Baby Yoda these days. So it's kind of like taking a puppet or a creature and putting electrical, pneumatic, or hydraulic actuators inside so you can make it move on its own. And so the idea is to make these characters that people build come to life.
Great. So you mentioned about the theme parks or the restaurants or those type of physical places where this can be. I can understand these live places where people see an object, but a lot of the times these days, the movies or anything recorded video will have an animated object that through computer graphics, right?
Yeah. So animatronics, even though you can do a lot of computer generated imagery, you still find a lot of animatronics because it gives the actors something real to interact with. It also allows the people controlling the animatronic to have it react to what the actors are doing in the moment. So you can kind of create a performance very much in the moment where everybody's reacting to each other and you're not having something kind of appearing off screen and being added in later. So modern day directors and producers still like having real animatronics for their movies. It also makes it easier to add visual effects later. And what we find nowadays is a great combination of the two things. So you'll have a moving animatronic and maybe they'll add in computer generated eyes later on because that's a little harder to do physically. So you have this combination going. And of course, the studios love to then trot out these real animatronics at press events and at opening nights and to set them up on display because they still exist physically. So it's a great way to kind of market the film as well.
Animatronics, though has origins in the entertainment world, have become more sophisticated and wide-reaching in their applications. From toys, motion pictures, theme parks, animatronics also finds its applications in the medical field. simulating patient behavior and organ functions for research and training purposes. Autonomatronics, a more advanced figures with sensors and cameras that can see, hear, and respond from the crowd, are used for live interactions and research purposes. So you mentioned a few different things like hydraulics, electronics. Can you walk me through what are the different technologies, so to speak, is involved? I'm using the term technology broadly. I know there are a lot of artistic skills that goes in here, but what is involved in making an animatronics object?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what style of animatronic you're doing. So the film animatronics kind of come from a background of puppetry, and puppeteers who do mechanized puppets, they'll work with a lot of mechanical linkages and wires and sometimes cable controls as well to be able to manipulate these. The theme parks sort of started out with pneumatics and hydraulics as well. Their tradition is more of the machinist, mechanic, who's adapting these mechatronic systems to control characters. So they have these hydraulics controlled with programming logic controllers and all that kind of control system. And they moved into servo motors then as servo motors became better and cheaper. So now you have a lot of these kind of DIY hobbyist animatronics because you can buy a bunch of cheap servos and control them all with an Arduino and kind of put them inside of either an existing character or build a character on top of it. So it could be anything from mechanics and machine shops to actual engineers and mechanical electrical engineers to the kind of computer programmer maker type, depending on what you want to do.
What is the pneumatic type? Explain that a little bit more.
Sure. Usually you have a pneumatic cylinder, which is kind of like the cylinder on your screen door to keep it from closing too fast. So when you fill that with air, the arm extends. And when you empty the air, the arm retracts. So you get this linear motion. And so by attaching it to all sorts of linkages, you can make different kinds of motion. So usually the pneumatics are for these kind of broad back and forth motions. A lot of it is kind of binary motion because it's either out or in. You can't really have it stop halfway. So that's the early pneumatics. That's why they're kind of like jerky because they're kind of going back and forth between two positions. But it's really cheap, really accessible, and really reliable and very strong too. So that's why they were used a lot.
When I was researching about this topic, I was pretty surprised to learn, at least according to Wikipedia, it has a very long history. You are now running a program that is a first grad level program. So how were people getting trained in this until now? And I also would like you to take us through what can they learn in a program like yours?
Sure, yeah. Depending on how you want to look at it, it's got a really long history because, again, you can have all these automatons from hundreds of years ago that are water powered or steam powered. And then you have the watchmakers making spring loaded mechanisms. But definitely when electricity came around, that's when they started hooking up electric motors to these things. So you have a lot of the early Coney Island style amusement parks that would make things start moving. And it really was Walt Disney in the 50s and 60s who wanted to actually control these in a much more precise way and make them sync up with audio so you could have them singing or talking and their mouths are moving. And so that kind of drove the modern day of animatronics. But yeah, it's funny because there are no school programs for this. It's been very ad hoc up until now. The early days, again, you have these, what we now call mechatronics, where people would put together motors and hydraulics and electronics. A lot of Disney's people were coming out of World War II, where they had a lot of experience with hydraulic servos on the anti-aircraft guns and that kind of maintenance. And they're like, hey, we could use this to control things. So you would end up having a lot of people coming from backgrounds of, again, puppeteering, mechanical engineering, robotics, you could kind of learn it. And a lot of the early Disney people also came from the animation department. So they would learn how to draw characters in motion. And then it was just a few, well, not a few, but a very large leap to go to control a live character and making it look like it's alive. So animatronics training, you would find little pockets here and there where a robotics class would have an animatronics special topic or something, or you'd have a small trade school run by somebody who was doing animatronics where they would teach animatronics to a new generation. So our school is focused on kind of creating the all-inclusive look at animatronics and really focusing on the art of it, because you do get some pretty, I would say, stiff and unrealistic animatronics if you're just focusing on the technology. And nowadays the technology is so advanced, you could kind of pick stuff up off the shelf and run it through an iPad and have things that are way more sophisticated than they had 30, 40, 50 years ago. So by focusing on the art, we're kind of looking at the story and we're saying, like, what actually matters? Like, it doesn't matter if a character can move its mouth in 100 different ways. What matters is it saying something that the audience actually wants to listen to? Is it holding your interest? Is it creating an emotional connection? And you can find that you can actually do that through very simple means. And so you don't have to have the most technologically advanced robot in the world to tell a good story. But also, we do want to train them in the technology so that they know everything that's out there, so they don't feel limited by, like, oh, we can't do this yet because we haven't invented it yet. So we're trying to create a school where people will invent the technologies for animatronics in the future.
Oh, interesting. Now, this is a grad level program specifically for this program, but also in general, if somebody wants to get into animatronics, what are some of the interests and preliminary skills they would need? I mean, is it more somebody who likes tinkering with objects, building things, or people who are more on the technology side? Who will enjoy this field or be successful at this field?
Sure. We get a wide range of people. So my school is primarily a theater-based school. So we do get people from the world of theater, especially with props, because they like props and they want to play with the servos and the microcontrollers and things like that. And theater traditionally doesn't give them the chance. And so they're looking for something a little more advanced. We also get a fair number of engineers with interest in that because they've gone through their undergrad engineering and they have a solid foundation in the science, but they want to be more hands-on and they want to be a little more artistic and they don't want to be just drafting pulleys for the rest of their life. We get puppeteers as well, computer science. It's a pretty broad range, and we create a class of cohorts with a lot of different skills so they could kind of learn from each other. I always tell people, if you're an engineer who's interested in art, or if you're an artist who understands engineering, then that's the kind of person we're looking for. If you're doing engineering in college and it's time for you to pick a specialization and you're like, I don't like any of them, I don't really fit in a neat little box, maybe this is the place for you. Or if you're an artist and you're like, I want to play with the technology, I don't want to just sculpt and paint, I want to see what I could do with what's out there, this is the place for you.
And you kind of touched upon it. So in the program itself, they will learn the theater aspect of the artistic aspect of it, imagining story writing. What else do they learn in the program?
Yeah, we do a lot of digital work because that's kind of where the field is heading, and you can do a lot digitally. So we kind of give them a whole lot of programs for doing CAD and for doing digital sculpting and digital animation, and trying to bridge the gap between digital visualization combined with the practical world. Like, can you actually create something digitally and make it physically? You know, we do it through 3D printing, but also through animation and things like that. So a lot of digital. We're always doing hands-on work. So with sculpting, molding, and casting, you know, you kind of just, you always have to have your hands busy. So you get that kind of creative mileage with your work, so you can make things by hand. And then a mix of sort of the engineering and the science. So like, is this motor strong enough to do what I want? And is this material going to break if I use it? How much power does this need? Do I have big enough batteries? Is this going to break? All that kind of stuff. So the hope is that you get a very well-rounded education, but also you're introduced to the industry and you see all the different specializations there are, and you get a clear idea of what direction you want to kind of head in.
And can you give a little bit of this thing on what are the specializations in this field?
Oh, sure. Depending on the size of the company, you could be extremely specialized. So you have
Hmm.
people figuring out the frames that go inside and the mechanics and how it's all going to move and move without a lot of friction. You have the people putting in the motors, the pneumatic. You have the people doing the wiring and connecting it. You might have separate people just programming after the fact. So syncing it
Hmm.
up with the music and the sound effects or making it interactive. And then you have the people, we call them figure finishers, and they'll do anything from sculpting the body to covering it in skin to adding fur and hair and eyebrow, adding the eyeballs. There's some companies that have a separate eyeball department because eyeballs are
Wow.
so important and they're in every character. You can just be doing the costumes for animatronics. You may not even be touching the mechanical stuff when you're done. So the costumes and the props, all that kind of stuff. And depending on what kind of company you're working for, again, you might also move into some kind of management role or testing role, or again, pre-visualization. You might write the stories that the animatronics are acting out. So it's kind of a microcosm of all the other sort of performing arts and film and TV. You're doing all of it for your little characters.
Hmm. One of the very obvious field is the performing arts related theater, production design type of departments. But where else people who are trained in it can find employment? Like how big is this industry? And what are the opportunities?
Oh, sure. If you look at the global entertainment industry, theme parks are definitely really big. There's a number of companies in the United States. And right now they're actually doing a lot of stuff for overseas companies. So there's some fairly big theme park expansions coming to the United States. But when you look at China, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and even Europe, there's theme parks popping up all over the place. And they all want animatronics and animatronic characters. So some of the larger American companies are actually being bought up by Southeastern Asian companies because
Interesting.
they just want to buy an American company. They just want to buy somebody who's already advanced in animatronics. And then if you look at all the companies springing up overseas as well, I saw there's a town in China that has 19 companies doing animatronic dinosaurs just
Wow.
in one town because there's so many. Every restaurant, family destination wants at least one animatronic dinosaur. So there are a lot of what people are calling destinations and experiences. So beyond theme parks, it'll just be a place for families to go. Maybe a
Hmm.
city is fixing up their seaport area, their riverside area, or something like that, or just a restaurant as well.
Hmm.
They want something that like draws you in.
Hmm.
Nowadays you can do anything digitally and you can do whatever you want on your phone. And the only way you could compete is by having something more spectacular in real life. So
Uh-huh.
it's like a dinosaur, a singing mouse, something.
Yeah. I would imagine Middle East is a big market as well then.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, they are pouring a lot of money into arts, entertainment, and spectacle in the Middle East.
While there is no market data specifically about animatronics, market researchers about industry segment classified as entertainment robots consisting of toys, educational, retail and other segments for the purposes of entertainment is estimated to grow more than 11 billion US dollars to reach 60 billion market size by 2029. What are the ways to enter into this field? Like, is this through internships or building personal portfolio? What are the ways one can get into the workforce?
Yeah, a portfolio is definitely very important. And again, a lot of this stuff is pretty accessible. So if you don't have access to education or an internship, you can do some stuff on your own. You can build your own animatronics, you can sculpt something, you can draw. I make my students draw in their sketchbooks every day.
Mhm.
That's something that they should keep doing. And then, yeah, a lot of the companies provide internships. So Disney and Universal, of course, have massive internship programs. And a lot of the other animatronic companies, Animax, Life Formations, um, all around, they'll have summer internships or they'll have internships during the fall and spring. And again, with the larger companies like Disney and Universal, they also do a lot of employee training. So in the past, a lot of their animatronics people started out working in the rides department. something like that. And then they will move up to animatronics maintenance, and then move up animatronics fabrication, and then eventually animatronics programming and animatronics design. So sort of working your way up in the company. But yeah, there's lots of opportunities for internships.
Are these companies that deploy these animatronics puppets, they are the ones hiring these people, or there are separate companies focused on just building animatronics for the different clients?
Yeah, most these days the animatronics aren't really done in-house, so they'll hire a place that will build the animatronics for them. And a lot of this information is kind of under NDA, so it's hard to find out like who's building the
Building
animatronics for a park. But it's very rare these days for it to be done in-house. So there are companies all over the place doing this kind of stuff.
Is there a specific region like finance, East Coast is the hub, and technology, San Francisco Bay Area? Like, is there a hub for this activity, like where most of the animatronics companies exist?
Sure. It's surprising how spread out it is. You definitely do find a lot of companies based in Orlando because of all the theme parks there. So
Theme
if you
parks.
just want to go to a location and start freelancing around, Orlando's really big. If you want to do film, LA is still really big for all the animatronics companies out. But again, like some of these big companies, Animax is in Nashville, Life Formations is in Cincinnati. There's a big company, the Dinosaur Company, and that's in close to Dallas, Texas. So some of these companies are really kind of all over the place, but you can't go wrong like looking at Orlando for theme park or LA for film and TV.
Somebody who is wanting to get into this field, what would your advice be? What should they be prepared for? Something that they should know. Like every field has some demands or some needs of the industry that comes with it. Do you have anything that you want the students preparing for this field to be aware of and be ready for it?
Yeah, it's good to kind of study the history of animatronics and study a lot of the existing animatronics to see what is possible, what is being done, what works well and what doesn't. It's always great to study, design and story to understand what makes a good result. Because again, you can play around with advanced robots all you want, but if you don't know how to tell a good story, then you're not going to understand why you make certain choices versus why you don't. So an understanding of story, design, emotional connection, that's surprisingly, that's what I hear most of the companies say that they're not finding. They can always find somebody who can use a piece of software or could use certain tools, but somebody who understands the deeper reason why we're doing this is kind of hard to find. So thinking about that and focusing on that. And then, you're going to use software. You're going to use 3D modeling software. You're going to do some kind of programming at some point. So if you've never done that, starting to dip your toes in that and at least getting a feel for how it works, getting the idea of a programmer's brain, that way of thinking of how you build code is certainly helpful. And again, there's so many specializations. It's hard to say like any one sort of thing, but I would say like an understanding of good art, good story, good character is kind of paramount.
Now, somebody who wants to get into your program, does it work like any other grad programs? Do you go through the essays or portfolio? How do you look for students? If you could just give some information about that.
Sure. Yeah, they usually start out, they'll send in with their application a portfolio, an artistic statement, which is basically like an essay about what interests you in animatronics, why you're picking our school, what you want to do with your career. And then it's resume and transcripts. And so we kind of look at that and then we schedule interviews. And that's kind of a time for us to get to know the person applying. And that's usually, it's a two-way street because we're trying to find out if we can give the student what they're looking for as much as can they contribute to our program. So if they seem to have the skills and the desire and our program can give them what they want, then yeah, we'll offer acceptance and then we'll just go from there. Right now, we're only in the second year, so we only have 2 classes. It's a 3-year program. each class has
3-year
four
program.
students in it. Yes. So each class has 4 students in it. So we're kind of aiming for between 3 and 6. We don't have hard numbers because, again, we're looking at each student. So if there's a year where nobody's right, even if we have a lot of applicants, we don't take them. And if there's a year where there's a lot of people who are right and they fit, then we'll make room for them. We don't have quotas and we don't have like a cutoff or anything like that. It's much more individual about whether you're the right student at that time.
What are the resources would you recommend for somebody who wants to learn about this field in general? Are there any specific resource that you would like to point out?
Sure. There's an online collection of videos called the Stan Winston School, and that's put out by Stan Winston Studios, is the ones behind the Jurassic Park animatronic dinosaurs and Terminator 2 and Aliens and so many sort of classic animatronics. So they have a great line of videos. You have to pay to access them, but they go through a lot of kind of film style animatronics. There's a company out in California called Garner Holt, which has an education wing, and they just started doing adult animatronic summer camps, and they could be online, I believe. So again, it's costs money, but you get a kit and they kind of guide you through building it. And so that's a good option. Sometimes like your local makerspace can have people who can help you out. But again, there's so many YouTube videos that you could kind of access. And a lot of people, again, make sort of 3D printed kits that you download, print, buy some servos, put together, and you could sort of see how it works. Surprisingly, there's not too many good books about the subject. There's a few out there, but if you're looking for like a comprehensive, this is how animatronics work, that doesn't really exist. So I usually like to go through YouTube or Stan Winston Studios, or occasionally you find like one of these professionals who are offering like camps or workshops.
You've written a few books about the props field, and I would imagine about this as well. Would you like to say a few words about that?
Oh, sure. I just handed in the manuscript to the 3rd edition of my props building guidebook. The first 2 editions have been around for the last 10 years, and that's a look at building props in a professional workshop. All the materials we use, all the tools, techniques, how props go from words on a page to an object on the screen or the stage. So that's used by universities and shops all over the world. It's been pretty popular. I have another book called the Prop Effects Guidebook, and that's focused on things like smoke and magic and lights and motion. And that does get into like servos and pneumatics and microcontrollers and things like that. So that's a good book if you just want to learn how things move, not necessarily animatronics. I kind of go into a lot of that there. And then my latest book is called Prop Building for Beginners, 20 props that you can build. I forget the exact title, but that's 20 different props, step-by-step instructions with materials and tools that you probably have around your house or that you could buy very easily in almost any location. And they're very kind of standard props, like a treasure chest, a loaf of bread, things like that. So if you're the community theater person who has to build a skull for Hamlet and you don't know what you're doing, I have instructions for it. You can build it with tissues and a block of styrofoam.
Awesome. Eric, this has been really, really very informative. I'm sure you inspired quite a few folks today who have all these skills. They don't know what to do about it. I'm sure they will look it up, all these resources you shared. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
To learn more about Animatronics graduate program, go to uncsa.edu, Animatronics department. You can also find more information about Animatronics field in the description section of the YouTube video. This is Career Calling, and I'm your host, Pratibha Pandit. Thank you for tuning in.